Hi, second grade readers. Welcome back to the final chapter of Stanley in Space by Jeff Brown. Thank you, Scholastic Publishing Company. All right, they're all aboard, both the Lamb Chop family and all the Tyrans, the Star Scout, headed back to planet Earth. Chapter 10, heading home. Mr. and Mrs. X and the new baby, said President Ott beside his wife on a ledge above the magnifying window. Ah, yes, on the fridge. The people of Tira were being made as comfortable as possible in the various nooks and crannies of the Star Scout. Stanley and Arthur had cleared a cupboard where Tira High School students could study during the trip, and Mrs. Lambchop had cut up sheets to make hundreds of little blankets and put out bits of cotton for pillows. Makeshift, Mrs. X, she said now, settling the X's on the fridge, but such short notice. Back a bit from the edge, yes? Short notice indeed, said Mrs. X. So many. Not to worry, said Mrs. Lambchop, as she smiled proudly. My son, the chief pilot, will call ahead. From a nearby shelf, Captain Ick whispered an apology for attempting to paralyze Arthur. Between you and I didn't really think it would work, he said. Between you and me, said Mrs. Lambchop. She's always correcting people with that, isn't she? But thank you, Captain Ick. She turned to Stanley. We're all ready, dear. Stanley checked his controls. Let's go. Tyrans, President Ott called for attention. Our national anthem. Everywhere in the Star Scout, Tyrans rose, their hands over their hearts. He hummed. Oh, excuse me. Hummed Mrs. Ott, setting a key, and they began to sing. Tira the lovely, Tira the free, here, dear planet, our promise to thee. Where'er we may go, where'er we may roam, we'll come back to Tira, Tira our home. The words echoed in the softly lit cabin. Many Tyrans were weeping, and the eyes of the Lambchops as they took their seats glistened too. Be it ever so humble, there's no planet so dear. We'll always love our Tira from far or from. Stanley pressed the start button and vroom! Before they had time to finish, the Star Scout's rockets roared to life. The singing stopped suddenly, and Mrs. X cried out from the fridge, Oh my, is this thing safe? Yes, indeed, Mrs. Lambchop called back. Perhaps, said Mrs. X, but it is my belief that if Tyrans were meant to fly, we'd have wings. Vroom, vroom. The Star Scout lifted now, gaining speed as it rose. Its mission was done. The strangers who had called from a distant planet were no longer strangers, but friends. It was all very satisfactory, Stanley thought. The other Lambchops thought so too. I didn't realize it was another chapter at the end. Let's go ahead and finish. Chapter 11, Earth Again. Real pleasure to welcome you, Tyrans, said the president, almost done with his speech. I wish you a fine year on Earth. Before him on the White House lawn, like the real place, right? Not on planet Tira. They're on Earth now. Before him on the White House lawn, with newspaper and TV reporters all about, sat the Lambchops and, in a tiny grandstand built especially for the occasion, the people of Tira. The Tyrans were now applauding politely, but they looked nervous, and Mrs. Lambchop guessed why. That crowd at the Space Center for the Star Scouts landing, that drive through crowded streets in Washington, D.C. Poor Tyrans, everywhere they looked, giant buildings, giant people. How could they feel comfortable here? But a surprise was in store. Across the lawn, a great white sheet had been spread. Now, at the president's signal, workmen pulled the sheet away. Welcome, said the president, to Tiraville 2. Big reveal. Gasps rose from the Tyrans, then shouts of joy. Before them, on what had been the White House tennis court, lay an entire village of tiny houses, one for each Tyran family, with shops and schools and churches and a miniature railway serving all principal streets. Begun when Stanley called ahead from space, Tiraville 2 had been completed well before the Star Scouts' arrival, thanks to rush deliveries from leading toy stores in Washington and New York. In other words, when Stanley called, they got everything set up. The toy stores had a special village made just for the Tyrans. The excited Tyrans ran from the grandstand to explore their new homes, and soon happy voices rose from every window and doorway of Tyrraville 2. Nice furniture! Hooray! Fresh lemonade! No more Fizzola! In the cupboards, see? Shirts, dresses, suits, shoes, underwear even. The Otts, General App, Dr. Epp, and Captain Ick came to say goodbye, and the lamb chops knelt to touch fingertips in farewell. The TV men filmed this, and Arthur made everyone laugh, pretending to be paralyzed by the touch of Captain Ick. Then the newsmen left, and the Tyrans returned to Tyrraville 2, and only the president remained with the lamb chops on the White House lawn. Well, back to work, the president sighed. Goodbye, lamb chops. You're all heroes, you know. Save the nation. Not really, Stanley said. They couldn't have conquered us. Well, you know what I mean, the president said. Your folks care to stay for supper? Thank you, no, Mrs. Lambchop said. It's quite late, and this has been an exciting but very tiring day. It was bedtime when they got home. Stanley and Arthur had a light supper with hot chocolate to help them sleep, after which Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop tucked them in and said goodnight. The brothers lay quietly in the darkness for a moment. Then Arthur chuckled. The Magno-Titanic paralyzer was sort of scary, he said. You were brave, Stanley, protecting me. That's okay, Stanley said. You're my brother, right? I know. Arthur was sleepy now. Stanley, when the Tyrans go back, will their land and water be okay? Will they let us know? I guess so. Stanley was drowsy too. Good night, Arthur. Good night, said Arthur, and soon they were both asleep. Time has passed. And in time, the last page says, from the great farness of space, but a farness no longer strange or unknown, another message came. We are home, all is well. And again, we are home. Thank you, Earth. All is well. The end. So we know that message came from the Tyrans. They had finally recovered their planet and gotten back safely and were able to live and survive there. Ooh, there's one more little part, guys. Let's finish it now. Prologue. Stanley Lambchop spoke into the darkness above his head. Can't sleep. It's the rain, I think. There was no response from the bed across the room. I'm hungry too, Stanley said. Are you awake, Arthur? I am now, said his younger brother. You woke me. Stanley fetched an apple from the kitchen and ate it by the bedroom window. The rain had worsened. I'm still hungry, he said. Raisins, shelf, murmured Arthur, half asleep again. Crash came thunder. Lightning flashed. Stanley found the little box of raisins on a shelf by the window. He ate one. Crash, flash. Stanley ate more raisins. Crash, flash. Arthur yawned. Go to bed. You still can't be hungry. I'm not actually. Stanley got back into bed, but I feel sort of, different, I guess. He slept. Where is Stanley? Breakfast is ready, George. We must wake the boys. Mrs. Lambchop said to her husband. Just then, Arthur Lambchop called from the bedroom he shared with his brother. Hey, come here, hey! Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop smiled, recalling another morning that had begun like this. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. An enormous bulletin board they discovered had fallen on Stanley during the night, leaving him unhurt, but no more than half an inch thick. You guys know that for measurement. And so he had remained until Arthur blew him round again, weeks later, with a bicycle bump. Hey, the call came again. Are you coming? Hey! Mrs. Lambchop held firm views about good manners and correct speech. Hey is for horses, not people, Arthur, she said as they entered the bedroom, as you well know. Excuse me, said Arthur, but the thing is, I can hear Stanley. I just can't find him. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop looked about the room. A shape was visible under the covers of Stanley's bed, and the pillow was squashed down as if a head rested upon it. But there was no head. Why are you staring? The voice was Stanley's. But there's nobody there. That sets us up for the next chapter in this series, Invisible Stanley. I'm sure you can check it out. If you do not have a copy at home, you could probably find it either on Amazon or at our public library. You can get an electronic copy and read from your tablet. All right, I hope you enjoyed this book. We will start a new one next week. Thanks for listening.